Welcome viewers. In this session, we will be talking about photographic composition. You often go out for taking pictures. After taking pictures, we come to your home back, and when you look at the pictures, sometimes you are not happy with its composition. There is no set rules for compositions, but I can give you certain guidelines. In this session, we will be talking about elements of composition, rules of the third, placement of the subject, and framing. The act of composing is arranging different elements within the frame in a deliberate and usually in an attractive way. Now, what is a frame or a format? What is essential in any pictorial composition is a frame or a format. Now, the frame of a photographic camera is either square or rectangle. There is no fast rule that you have to compose within a square format or you have to compose in a rectangular format. But most of the subject looks good in a rectangular format. In a square format, square objects looks good. But if you have a square format camera, what we do, we crop the frame. After taking the picture, we take the rectangular output of it. Now, this rectangular output can be horizontal as well as vertical. Usually, a landscape looks nice on a horizontal rectangular format. A portrait looks nice in a vertical rectangular format. Now, we will talk about the different elements for composition. When an onlooker looks at a blank frame for a long period, he feels uneasy. This is because the human eye continues to hunt in a void space until they find a spot or object in it. For easier understanding, we have chosen a point as an object. This is because the point is the simplest element which has an existence but has no dimension. Now, the moment we place a point within the frame, our eye starts mapping the point from the four corners of the frame, and it creates an tension. This tension remains until the point goes to the center and it is balanced from the four sides. This creates tension until it reaches the center of the frame. Here it attracts equal tension from four corners of the frame. Look at this photograph of famous painter Pablo Picasso by renowned photographer Irving Penn. Here Irving Penn has placed the most important elements of the personality of Picasso in the center of the frame. The painter's eye reflects his personality and it is at the center of the frame. Now, I will talk about rule of the third. The placing the element other than the center of the frame, we follow a rule called rule of the third or the golden mean of intersection. We divide the frame both horizontally and vertically into three equal parts. Thus, we get four intersections of the line. Now, we choose from these four intersections of point lines for the placement of the visual elements. We choose from among these intersections the proper position for placement of visual elements. Now, look at these frames. Here, the important element is placed in the intersections of lines. Now, how to choose where to place among these four intersections of lines? If the subject is facing left and looking down, we place the object at the top right intersection point. If the subject is looking up and towards right, we place it in the lower intersection point and vice versa. So, with the look we place the subject in different intersection points. Now, if there are more than one elements in the frame, for example, if there are two elements, for example, here if there are 2 points, then our eye starts moving between the points and it produces an imaginary line in between them, and it is a straight line. Geometrically, a line is more complex than a point. It has length but hardly covers any area. The shortest between these 2 points is a straight line. Straight line can be either horizontal, vertical or oblique depending on its placement. A horizontal line should be always parallel to the base of the frame. This gives a pleasant feeling to the onlooker. Try to avoid horizontal line bisecting the frame into 2 equal halves. This provides no preference to either segment of the frame. Now, the horizontal line is bisecting the frame in 1/3 and 2/3. The rule is, whenever you are framing a landscape, find out which area is more interesting or decide which part you want to give more stress. If the sky with the clouds are more spectacular, and if you want to give more stress or more emphasis, fill 2/3 of the frame with it. If the foreground of the scenery is more interesting, fill 2/3 of the frame with it. In this example, to give more stress on the foreground of the Mount Williamson of California, the renowned photographer Ansel Adams had filled 2/3 of the frame with the boulders of the riverbed. Whenever there is a vertical line in a frame, they always dominates the scene. Avoid vertical lines bisecting the frame into 2 equal parts. Try to place the vertical lines in such a way that it divides the frame into 1/3 and 2/3. An oblique line in the frame gives the sense of instability. Look at this visual. Here, a line between the upper left hand corner and the lower right hand corner gives us a feeling of downwards movement. The line between the lower left hand corner and upper right hand corner gives us a suggestion of upward movement. For example, consider this Henry Cartier-Bresso's photograph, Little Greek Girl Mounting a Staircase. Here, the suggestion of upward movement has been dramatically brought out. This is because it has a direct relation to our habit of reading text from left to right. Moreover, our eyes moves along the line. But these implications will be completely different for those who are habituated reading script from right to left. For example, those who are habituated reading Arabic script. Zigzag lines are the series of connected diagonal lines. They tend to increase the area covered by them. A zigzag line induces to and fro movement of the eye and often produce a disturbing feeling. A curved line induces a smooth progressive movement of the eye, and which is often very poetic. Think of a frame with 3 points. As long they are in the same line, they represent a straight line. The moment one of them moves away from the regular placement, our eyes moves between the points in a triangular formation. Geometrically, a triangle is more complex than a straight line, and it is the most stable structure possible. Look at this example. This is an example of a triangular composition. You can also get the same feeling of a triangle when a line and a point are placed in a different locations. In a triangular composition, the most important is their vertices. The vertices opposite to the base of the triangle attracts most. When the base of the triangle is parallel to the base of the frame, the vertex opposite to the base attracts maximum concentration. Often, vertex of a triangle gives an idea of the directions of the moving body. Usually, placements of elements in a square or rectangular formation fails to generate interesting composition. However, a circular composition has its own charm. Usually, our eye moves from one element to other in a circular formation and gives us an interesting feeling. Whenever you compose a frame, you cover more area with the image, so there should be more positive space than negative space. What do I mean by positive space? Is a space which is covered with the objects, and the blank area is called the negative space. So, when you compose a frame, there should be more positive space than negative space. In a frame where there are objects is called positive space. The blank or empty space is called negative space. So, when you compose, you should always look for that there should be more positive space than negative space in a frame. And when you compose, there should be more looking space than the back space. There should be enough head space in a frame. Further, you also have to keep in mind about the balance of object within the frame. Now, the balance can be balance of mass, balance of tone and balance of color. What do I mean by balance of mass? For example, there is a small object in the left corner of the frame. So, it can be counterbalanced with an object in the right upper corner which is much big in size. Now, in a frame there can be one corner is with a bright object. For example, the lower left hand corner has a bright object that can be counterbalanced with an object of dark tones in the upper right hand corner. That is the balance of tone. Then there can be balance of color. For example, your left side of the frame is of certain color. For example, it is red. That can be counterbalanced with the right side with a complementary color. For example, complementary of red is green. So, you can have a balance of color. Another important element of composition is perspective. The perspective gives us an idea of distance from relative size of the object. If you look at a picture, you can get the idea of the distance from the relative size of the object. For example, person is at very far and another person is close to the camera. How can you distinguish? You can distinguish by seeing the relative size. Now, this perspective can be different kinds. There can be 1 point perspective, 2 point perspective, aerial perspective. So, what is 1 point perspective? If you look at a picture of 1 point perspective, you will find that all the lines they converge to a point in the frame or maybe outside the frame, but they are converging lines. In 2 point perspective, the lines are converging into 2 points. For example, the image of this building, okay. Especially when you cover a building from a corner, its horizontal lines they appear to converge in 2 points. This is an example of a 2 points perspective. The third type of perspective is aerial perspective that is created with the atmospheric haze. For example, when you look at a mountain, you can see there are different layers of the mountain range and you can see the layers which is in front is much clearer than the background. By the atmospheric haze, the layers in the backgrounds are much in haze than the clear which is in the front. This gives an idea that the foreground mountain cliff is nearer to the point from which we are seeing than the background object. So, this is what is known as perspective. Perspective gives an idea of the relative distance of the object in terms of the relative size of the object. The perspective gets changed when we change the camera position. If we stand with the camera in one position and do zoom in, zoom out, the perspective does not change. But the moment you move with the camera, the perspective changes. It changes when you move both horizontally as well as vertically. This helps us to composing, especially when we are taking pictures of a static object. When the subjects are static, we cannot change those elements and you cannot place them in the form you want to place. And to do this, what you need to move with the camera. And in a particular angle, you can make a particular formation by moving with the camera. The perspective also changes, as I have said, with the height. You can change the height and you can get a different perspective of the same area. So, perspective is also a very important element in composition. So far what we have discussed is basically the rules of composition, but there is no hard and fast which rule to follow. So, whenever you choose to compose a picture, identify its elements, look for the lines carefully, arrange them in a geometrical pattern. By selecting appropriate angle, you may come out with striking composition. But remember, these rules are for your guidance only. And a good composition is one that communicates effectively.